I worked the graveyard shift at a small diner just outside of town. Most nights it was pretty uneventful. Truckers grabbing a quick bite, a couple of late-night workers stopping in for coffee, the usual. But there was one regular who always gave me the creeps. His name was Frank, a guy who looked like he hadn't slept in days. He always came in around 2 a.m., sat at the counter and ordered a cup of coffee and a slice of apple pie. I'd serve him, and he'd barely say a word. The first few nights, I didn't think much of it, but then I noticed something odd. He would stare at me, not in a casual way, but in a way that made my skin crawl. One night, I brought him his usual, and as I set the coffee in front of him, I could see his eyes flicking to the window behind me and then down to my feet. He didn't say anything, just kept his eyes fixed on me. I tried to smile and walked away, but as I did, I heard him whisper, "I like the way you move." I froze. It was such a small thing, but the tone in his voice, I knew something was wrong. The next time he came in, I tried to be more attentive, but I noticed he had started bringing a notebook with him. He'd sit there for hours writing in it, occasionally glancing up at me. I tried to shake it off, thinking he was just eccentric, but one night I glanced over at his notebook. The pages were filled with scribbled notes, mostly about me. Things like, "She looks scared when I look at her," and "I bet she's hiding something under that apron." My heart skipped a beat. He was watching me, studying me in a way that made my blood run cold. The next morning I quit. I couldn't shake the feeling that Frank wasn't just another customer. He was something far darker. It was a busy Saturday night, and the diner was packed. I was working the front, running orders to the kitchen, when I saw them come in, two parents and their two kids. They were dressed in old-fashioned clothes, the kind you only see in pictures from the 50s. It was almost like they didn't belong, but what really stood out was how they behaved. They didn't speak a word to each other. They sat at the booth quietly, their eyes fixed straight ahead. The father stared out the window, the mother never looked up from the menu, and the kids just stared down at their hands, not even glancing at the toys they brought along. I took their order, trying to be polite, but they didn't make eye contact. It was like they were completely disconnected from the world around them. When I brought their food, they ate in complete silence, barely touching their food. The weirdest part? The kids didn't make a single sound, not even a fork clinking. It was like they were just going through the motions, but not really eating. After a while, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I started noticing little things, how the father's hands shook as he picked up his cup of coffee, how the mother's face was perfectly still, like she was frozen in time. The more I watched, the more unsettling it became. I couldn't explain why, but it felt like they were not even alive, just moving, existing without really living. When I went back to check on them, I noticed the kids were gone. In fact, the entire family had disappeared, without a trace. The table was completely cleared, as though no one had ever been there. I couldn't even remember exactly when they left, and the whole thing left me with a sense of deep unease. Maybe they were just a family with a strange habit of being quiet, but something about them didn't sit right with me, and I couldn't forget them for days. I worked at a diner on a lonely stretch of highway that often attracted truckers and travelers. One night, around 11 p.m., a man in his late 40s walked in. He was scruffy, with a jacket that looked like it had seen better days, and he had a worn look about him, like he hadn't had a good night's sleep in years. He didn't sit at the counter like most customers. Instead, he sat at a booth, facing the window. I didn't think much of it at first, but as the minutes ticked by, I started to get the sense that something was off. He hadn't ordered anything yet, just staring out the window, his face expressionless. Every now and then, he glanced toward the door, but when he did, it was like he was scanning the room, as if expecting someone. I brought him a menu, and he took it without saying a word. He kept staring out the window. When I returned, he still hadn't ordered. I asked if everything was all right, and he just nodded. There was no emotion in his eyes, just a blank stare. After a while, I started to feel his gaze on me. He wasn't looking at me directly, but he was watching my every move from the corner of his eye. It was unnerving. I'd walk by, and I could feel his gaze follow me. But when I turned to look, he would be staring out the window again. It was like a game he was playing, and I was the object of his fixation. Then, without warning, he stood up and walked out. I didn't think much of it until I noticed the strange thing he'd left behind: his coat. I went outside to return it, but when I looked around, he was nowhere in sight. It was a quiet night, and there was nowhere he could have disappeared to that quickly. I went back inside, trying to shake off the feeling of being watched, but I couldn't. That man didn't just come in for a meal. He was watching me, maybe even stalking me. And the worst part was, I wasn't sure if he was gone for good. It was a rainy evening, and I was working the late shift when a man walked in. He looked disheveled, his clothes damp from the rain, but he was smiling. He ordered coffee and a sandwich, and I was happy to serve him. He was one of those people who seemed instantly likable, the kind who could talk to anyone. We chatted about the weather, the town, and eventually he started talking about himself. His name was Mark, and he'd just moved into a nearby house. He was in his late 20s, easygoing, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. I found myself laughing at his stories, and for a moment, it almost felt like we'd known each other for years. Then out of nowhere, his demeanor changed. He leaned forward, his face serious, and asked, "Have you ever felt like someone's watching you when you're alone?" The question was so out of place that it sent a chill down my spine. I laughed awkwardly, not sure how to respond. He didn't laugh with me, though. Instead, he just stared at me, his eyes intense. "I mean," he continued, "people like you, working in places like this, you're alone a lot, aren't you? It must be scary sometimes." I felt a wave of discomfort wash over me. I tried to change the subject, but he kept going, speaking in a calm, deliberate tone, almost as if he were testing me. I didn't know how to get away, so I just stood there, nodding along. Finally, after what felt like forever, he finished his coffee and stood up. He smiled again, almost too wide, and said, "It's nice talking to you. I'll be back again." The next morning, I found a note on the counter, written in his handwriting. It said, "I'll be watching you. See you soon."